Hello again, welcome back everyone. LiquorHound here with you, and thank you for joining me once again for another spirit review video. Today we're going to be taking a look at a new line called Found North Canadian Whiskies, basically. Now they just call it Found North Whiskies or Found North Rye Whiskies, and they have two different color labels to kind of signify that. The lighter being the Rye Whiskey line, and the darker being the just whiskey line. And of course, when you say whiskey, it can be a combination of corn and rye, could be new barrels, ex-bourbon barrel, matured whiskeys from Canada. And in this case of the 8-year-old, it actually is a combination of corn whiskey and 8-year-old wheat whiskey. And when we look at the label, it actually tells you. I mean, they give you so much detail on these labels. I really love that about them. Full disclosure. I mean, they're telling you that this is labeled as an 8-year, but it's actually 73% 21-year, 27% 8-year wheat whiskey. It's bottled at 116.2 proof. This is batch number 5, and it retail priced at only $125. Now here in Texas where I'm at, unfortunately Found North hasn't made it to our shelves yet, but you can buy them online. That's how I was able to get my bottles. So if you don't see them in your local stores, just go online. Again, 8-year, $125, but it has majority 21-year. The next one we're going to take a look at is a 17-year batch 6, 128.2 proof, retail pricing $150. Now to create this blend, they actually used, I think it was like 5 different components, the majority of which was actually a batch 2 release that they had done in the past, won a bunch of awards. But batch 2 was mostly 17 and 18-year-old whiskeys. They took those whiskeys that were left over from the bottling, probably put it back in cask and aged it for another 20 months. Then they took those barrels and combined, they combined a 26-year-old Hungarian Oak matured corn whiskey and a 17-year-old Ex-Bourbon matured corn whiskey. Again, 128.2 proof, $150 for that one. Let's see. Next up, we're going to that rye whiskey. This is 17-year-old batch 3. This one's kind of unique in that it's using, again, the youngest being 17-year, but it's using 2 18-year-old ryes that were aged in ex-tequila casks and ex-Speyside whiskey casks in this one. Then they throw in a 21-year corn component and a 25-year-old corn component as well. I think also a little fresh 17-year, just straight up rye in this one. So a bunch of components again. But the majority of it being rye whiskey. Retail price on this one is $135 and 110.2 proof on that one. Last but not least is a single barrel, and you'll notice the single barrels come in this little shorter dumpy bottle, but the single barrel expressions that they do, again, single barrels are usually, you know, they're not as big and round usually, but sometimes single barrels can be phenomenal, and the way they're doing their blends, I expect nothing less here. This one is single barrel 007, 117.8 proof. It is 64% rye, 32% corn, and 4% barley, aged in PX casks. All right? Now then, we're going to get to the very beginning, starting with that 8-year-old. On the nose. Golly. So much buttercream, vanilla, butterscotch, caramel. It's mostly just a big heavy sugar component. You do get kind of that really mature corn whiskey where you pick up that little bit of that corn grain, but it's actually just big and round. There's a little bit of a light cherry, natural cherry to it. Maybe a little bit of like a honeydew. Yeah, I'll call that honeydew melon. That's about it. I mean, it's not super wild on the nose. I mean, it smells very delicious. And here we go. Let's go ahead and taste it. Golly. That drinks so much like a single grain Scottish whiskey. And I'm talking a mature single grain, not the young stuff that they're throwing in blends that just tastes almost like a vodka. Not that. When they mature up and they get over 20 years old, they start getting into like lightly tropical, some densely tropical, but this one is more on that light tropical spectrum. Golly, how do you describe that? That is, again, that kind of buttercream, the caramel, all that butterscotch, that's all there. But it starts going into like this rich, dense oak, tobacco type character, coconut, underripe pineapple, that honeydew melon is in there, leather, lots of leather in it. That is such a good bottle. Oof. There's almost a wisp of like barrel char in the background. But again, it stays on that sweeter, old, mature whiskey profile. And there's some oak because it actually makes my nose itch a little bit. If you know me personally, you'll know that that happens sometimes. When I get something that has a lot of oak in it, it'll make my nose itch. Big red wines with heavy tannins will sometimes do that as well. That is really, really well crafted. Oof. And I think the price point, $125. Great price for that. All right, now moving on to the 17-year. Batch 6, 128.2 proof. Again, this is that one that had that 26-year-old Hungarian Oak matured corn whiskey, and the youngest being 17. Wow. For its proof, you can get down into the glass, so that's surprising. I will say this one has a little bit of a little bit of that rye-ish component, I think, is in that blend. I think that's coming from that batch 2 blend that they matured up. But I pick up some rye spice character, some almost like grape skin tones to go in with that kind of, it has this kind of similar butterscotch, buttercream, caramel sweetness component to it. A little bit of hint of floral as you get to the edge of that glass. But you're picking up a big corn component as well. Some polish. Lightly apple cider vinegar. Heading into that furniture polish realm. Some plumminess. A little bit more of that melon component as well. Honeydew was on this one, kind of honeydewish. Canary melon because it's so sweet. Maybe a little hint of like poached pears as well. All right, let's taste it. Boom. So dark and dense. Ugh. Brown sugar. You get the caramel. You get that kind of buttercream. You get that butterscotch element. But this one has more depth on that sugar. It's more brown sugar, burnt, caramelized. Again, when you get into that, past that big, sweet, rich component, and again, viscosity, medium high. Both of those, medium high viscosity. But they have such a, oh, there we go. It starts getting into that kind of plum skin territory where it's a little bit bitter, little tannin is in there. Again, poached pears, that canary melon. Very savory whiskey. Does not drink its proof. 128.2? No, this drinks like it's like 120, 117. It's not super wild on the fruit, okay? Both of these so far have been much more onto the viscosity and the sweet, rich realm. Again, reminding me a ton of single grain whiskeys when they're mature. And unfortunately, single grain whiskeys have been taking off in price. You know, when I go to my specs here in Texas and I look at 24-year-old Strathclyde or Cameron Bridge or something like that. I used to be able to get those for 125, maybe 150, and now you're looking at $400, so on. So to be able to get that experience right here in a Canadian whiskey for $125, $150, this is a steal. This is going back 5 years, all right? All right. Again, not wild on fruit, but just huge, big, rich, sweet, enjoyable flavor. Now we're going to switch and we're going to go to the rye. I got to get this. So much dense leather and oak, again, on that back end of that one. I mean, that's 2 sips of water and I'm still tasting everything. All right, here we go, 17 year. This is that one that has a ex-tequila, ex-Speyside, 21 and 25-year-old corn components, 110.2 proof, $135, but 64% rye. Yeah, that's definitely noticeable. Right away you notice the shift. We're getting into that kind of floral rye, a little bit of that eucalyptus, menthol. But again, very sweet. Big caramel, lemongrass, almost like candied ginger in this one. Some similar melon though. I do like that. That honeydew that I was picking up here, this one was like honeydew, a little cantaloupe, or a canary melon actually in this one. And this one I would call a little cantaloupe in there. Little plums. But I am picking up that kind of eucalyptus menthol tick of that rye on that mid palate. But let's taste it. And you know what? You know what that is? That's that polish tone. The polish tone that I was picking up in these is in here, but when you mix it with that rye, it almost feels like that kind of eucalyptus menthol. That's exactly what that is. All right, let's taste it. Phenomenal rye. And you immediately know that's rye. White chocolate is in this one. Oof. White chocolate is something, a note that is, I very rarely find that in spirits. I can think of a Poli Barrique that was a grappa that was finished for 13 years from probably 10 years ago that had white chocolate and eucalyptus. This has that. Ugh, so welcome to experience that again. Yeah, big caramel, rich, again, medium-high viscosity. So far, every one of these. Caramel, you start picking up that rye freshness right away. Light, very, very subtle, like almost like a real fresh mint sprig is in here. You get that kind of floral rye, but not soapy, nothing too over the top, because I am sensitive to that. So typically when I start picking that up, I know it's still on the light spectrum. I don't even pick it up on a light side. So this is just pure light floral rye. Caramel, leather, the oak. That little bit of light plumminess, light cherry. Kind of savory herbaceousness to this one. And it kind of reminds me like, poof, I know that's what that is. That's that ex-tequila casks, right? That's what's giving you that. It's almost like a soil terroir type feel to that, and that's coming from those barrels. Oof, my goodness. $135 for that bottle. My goodness, yeah. And again, on that back end, you start getting into a little bit of that kind of, there's a little orange oil on the back end, leather, a little bit of tobacco on this one on the back end, just a smidge, not a lot. But the leather and the orange oil, it's a great rye note. That's an old rye character. And typically on Canadian ryes, even when they start getting up to 30 years old, they start slowly developing in that because the climate's so cold and they actually mature very slowly. But this one's already starting to pick that up, so that's great. Try to rinse this out before we go to that PX single barrel. Again, these are usually about, I want to say the single barrels are 110, right around there. This is single barrel 007, 117.8 proof. That's 64 rye, 32 corn, and 4% barley mash bill. So again, similar mash bill to Crown Royal, especially when they did that bourbon mash that they did. All right, a little darker on the nose, a little brown sugar. It's got a little bit of that mint, little menthol on this one as well. But there's a little more of the brandied cherry, a little plum to this one. But it is PX Cask, so that's probably definitely coming all off that. It hints at floral on the nose. But I'm focusing mainly on that fruit and a little bit of that rye spice. All right, let's taste it. Medium-high viscosity again. Not nearly as sweet as I was expecting coming off that PX Cask with this kind of whiskey base. That's pretty complex. Here we go. Let's figure it out. It enters and you're getting that kind of caramel butterscotch thing, a little of that vanilla cream. Then you start picking up all that rye. The rye jumps in. You're picking up fresh ground rye. You're also picking up a little mint. That, again, that sprig of mint, that little eucalyptus tone is in here. Almost like a little orchid on the floral. Like those white orchids. Baking spice swell. A little bit of chocolate sprinkled on the back end, a little cocoa. Big rich leather. Fruit still pulling to the back end. You're starting to get plums on the back end, as well as a little bit of that brandied cherry characteristic. On that herbaceous middle tone, when I was picking up that little eucalyptus, that little sprig of mint, there's also a little bit of lemongrass in this one. A little bit of thyme as well. A little sprig of that. So, again, I hope you enjoyed this video review. If you're out there, if you see this on the shelves, do not hesitate to buy any of these. If you can't see them on your shelves, buy them online. Again, for the quality to price ratio being this phenomenal, easily do that. So I hope you enjoyed this video review. Of course, if you can, join me over at patreon.com/LiquorHound to help support this kind of content where I'm giving you these unbiased reviews, straightforward. And of course, you're going to get them 2 weeks early. You're going to get them ad-free. Let's see, some giveaways and some tiers. But of course, if you can't join me over at Patreon, I greatly appreciate each and every one of my viewers here on YouTube. So keep leaving all those great comments. I'll get back to them just as soon as I can. Everyone, have a great day, and cheers.